In some instances, the Anunnaki spoke to people they chose to speak to, or some encounters that were unexpected, and the Bible has some of them reported in connection with Jacob. He fought with a divine being on a bridge at night. He also saw some of them coming and up and down a ladder from a hovering craft. And it is clear from those texts and from the depictions that not always were these contactors or relayers of divine messages to mankind, that they were actually the Anunnaki themselves. There is a text dealing, and I have it in this book, the latest book, dealing with the issue of how does one distinguish whether the encountered being was a living being, one of the Anunnaki themselves, or one of their robotic messengers, because they used more and more androids to contact and to communicate with mankind. This is a depiction of a statuette about this big, about a foot big, that shows one of those robotic beings. And as I said, there were instructions given of how does one determine whether this is a living being or just a messenger who is a robot or android. As you can see, these depictions, and sometimes just the main feature, their oval head and very prominent eyes were depicted, and not the whole body. You see the similarity to what is reported nowadays about the gray ones. I don't have a better word for it. Gray ones who appear to people from UFOs that are mostly depicted this way when they land with extended legs. And even not just the being, the occupants, but even those so-called UFOs are not a new phenomenon. On one of the field trips, I've taken the group in Jordan to a place where nobody else has gone for many years, because it was excavated for the first and last time in the 1920s by an archaeological delegation organized by the Vatican, the only one that the Vatican ever organized or sponsored. And that place is called Telelat Gasul. And there in the 1920s, archaeologists have discovered murals painted on the walls depicting these objects, these vehicles, which I suggest are very akin to today's UFOs. Now, I went there to see it. That for me was the first time too, with the group, because that is the place across the river on the east side of the Jordan River, opposite Jericho, from which, according to the Bible, the prophet Elijah was taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot. And I probably wouldn't be mistaken in suggesting that this is how that fiery chariot has looked. The people in antiquity witnessed not only these UFO-like objects or flying machines, but also rocket-like objects. And this one is a cylinder seal depiction from Crete, where I and the group were just this past June, and you can see it here. Now, all that I've told you so far, things that happened on Earth or people who came to us from another planet, really forces us to do what the Sumerians did, and that is focus on questions of astronomy. I assume that you all recognize this depiction of our solar system. This is not to scale again, and this is the sun. And then all the planets that we know of today are laid out in order. Closest to the Sun is Mercury, then there's Venus, and then there's Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the farthest out, Pluto. And it all looks like a very orderly solar system. Each planet orbits in its predestined orbital path, and one doesn't encroach on the other, etc. But things are not that tranquil, and certainly were not in the past in our solar system. First of all, these planets, Uranus, that is depicted here, was discovered by us only after the invention of the telescope around 1781, I think, something like that. And Neptune around 1840, and Pluto barely 66 years ago in 1930. Pluto has a very peculiar orbit, while all the planets, if you would show them this way, orbit the Sun more or less in the same plane, which is called the ecliptic. Pluto orbits at an angle of 17 degrees and has a peculiar orbit because it sometimes orbits ahead of Neptune and sometimes farther than Neptune. And nobody knows what brought about this odd orbit, because the theory is that there was some cloud of matter, a gaseous matter orbiting the Sun, and it started to coalesce, and then this planet coalesced here and this coalesced there, etc., and all of them orbit the Sun in the same plane. So what caused Pluto to have this odd orbit? It was discovered, especially when our spacecraft went that far, that Uranus lies entirely on its side. In other words, the north-south pole is not this way, but is this way. Here, where you see a perfect alignment, Mars, Jupiter, there's really what we call the asteroid belt, a belt surrounding the Sun, orbiting the Sun, made up of millions, if not billions, of broken up pieces, the remains of some planet. Was there once another planet? Some astronomers have no other explanation for the asteroid belt except that it was, and they say, well, it exploded. Now, if a planet would explode, the pieces would fly in all directions. Here, however, they continue to orbit like a belt, and indeed the Bible refers to the asteroid belt as the hammered out bracelet. So what was here before, and if there was a planet, what caused it to break up? And here I would like to stress to you that when we normally talk about Earth, we refer to it as the third planet, because you have 1, 2, 3, and of course, if you're very sophisticated these days, you don't say the third planet from the Sun, you say the third rock from the Sun, and then whoever hears you says, he's really with it. Now, the odd things, or the interesting things about Sumerian astronomical knowledge is that they referred to Earth as the seventh planet. And they counted not 11 members of our solar system, meaning the Sun, the Moon, and 9 planets, but 12. Here, for example, this is one of several that I could show you, but I chose just one. Here is the upper part of a stela, which means an engraved, a carved stone column. And you can see it in the museum in Berlin, used to be East Berlin, and that depicts all the 12 members of our solar system by their symbols as used at the time. And you can see here the Sun, you can see here the Moon, you can see here what was depicted as a winged planet, and we'll discuss it in a minute. You can see the symbols for all the others, and you can see the 7 dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which stand for the Earth. Now, there's no doubt, not only from the depictions, but also from texts, that the Earth was known as the 7th planet. And after my first book, The 12th Planet, was published, and I sent it around to some that are mentioned in it, I received a call from a respected astronomer who said, look, Mr. Sitchin, I've read the book, it's very interesting, but to tell you the truth, I really don't know much about the Sumerians and all those ancient texts, and which you say it's in this museum, that museum. Maybe you're right, maybe not, I don't know. But he said, as an astronomer, I can tell you that if anyone in antiquity called Earth the 7th planet, then everything else you are writing must be so. Because only someone coming from the outside in would say Pluto is the first, Neptune the second, Uranus the third, Saturn the fourth, Jupiter the fifth, Mars the sixth, and Earth the 7th planet. And that alone, he said, convinces me that you are right. Now, in that museum, in what at the time was East Berlin, there are collections of cylinder seals and their imprints. And when I researched my first book, I studied and looked at photographs of literally thousands of those cylinder seals or their depictions as rolled on wet clay. Many of them illustrate or enhance the depiction. This one shows the granting of the plow to mankind, the beginning of agriculture. And they enhance them with depictions of symbols of celestial planets, etc. And in this one, I found this depiction, which to me looked like a depiction of a solar system. And if I sketch what is on the cylinder seal, and the cylinder seal is from about 2500 BC, 4,500 years ago. Now this arrow is my addition, it's not on the seal. You see that it shows the sun, not as the ancients were supposed to know until Copernicus, that the Earth is in the center, the sun in the center, surrounded by planets of various sizes. And if you compare it to what we know today, you see that all of them are here. This is Mars, this is Jupiter, with one difference, that here, between Mars and Jupiter, the ancients depicted a planet, and we have only the asteroid belt. Now, what is the story of this additional planet? There is a Sumerian text that is known best to us from its translations into Akkadian and other ancient languages, that some call the Epic of Creation, which is really the original text from which the Bible and then provided a very concise or abbreviated version about how the heaven and the earth were created. Or sometimes it is known by its first two words, Enuma Elish, as many of the ancient texts are known. And that text, which all the other scholars, and I stress the word all, take as a myth, an allegorical tale, but which I decided is really a most sophisticated cosmogony, telling us first how the solar system came into being, and then how it attained its more or less present state. It tells us that when the solar system was still young, about 4 billion years ago, an invader from space appeared. The Babylonians called it Marduk, after their national god, Marduk, The Sumerians called this invader Nibiru, meaning planet of the crossing. And in Sumerian times, its symbol was the cross. Later on, its symbol was the winged disk. And they said that this invader thrust out from another solar system, which again is something that we concluded only very recently, that other suns, other stars may have planets around them, very recently, but the Sumerians wrote that thousands of years ago. Thrust from its own solar system through some calamity, was passing not far from ours and started to be attracted by the gravitational pull of the outer planets. Now these are Sumerian names of planets. This is their name for Neptune, and this is their name for Uranus, and this is their name for Saturn and Jupiter, etc. And this is a moon of Saturn that eventually became Pluto, thrust by all that happened here. And as it was drawn into the center of our solar system, it collided with its planet that had existed between Mars and Jupiter. It broke that planet, called Tiamat, into two. One part was thrust, one half was thrust into a new orbit, carrying with it one of the principal moons of Tiamat, and became Earth, our planet, which is really half a planet. From space it looks very beautiful and round. If you would siphon off all the water, you will see that it's really half a planet, even a little twisted. At one time, we know all the continents were on one side, and on the other side, which is still the Pacific Ocean, was a tremendous deep cavity. So we are living on half a planet. Our moon used to be a moon of Tiamat. The other half was broken into bits and pieces and became the hammered out bracelet that we call the asteroid belt. So all the mysteries that still baffle astronomers about why is Uranus on its side, what hit it to put it on its side, what brought about or created the asteroid belt, etc., etc., without belaboring this particular point, is explained by that Sumerian cosmogony. Now, what happened to the invader? According to the Sumerians, it became a member, the 12th member of our solar system, not orbiting the sun in more or less circular orbits like the planets do, and in a counterclockwise direction, but orbiting in a vast elliptical orbit that lasts 3,600 years, 3,600 of our years, because to whoever is on that planet, one orbit is 1 year, which explains the immortality, etc., of the gods. So 3,600 orbit, very elliptical, coming between Mars and Jupiter, and thus near our planet every 3,600 years. And it is then, according to the Sumerians, where comings and goings were taking place between that planet and our planet. I just mentioned briefly, perhaps here, this particular sketch was prepared in connection with an interview on camera that I had about 2.5 years ago with the chief astronomer of the United States Naval Observatory, which is part of the Department of Defense, which of course is the United States government. And he searched in behalf of the US government for what astronomers in that parlance call Planet X, meaning both the 10th planet, because if you have Sun, Moon, and 10th planet, the 12th body, Planet X, and also the unknown. And he estimated, and he sent me his celestial maps, which are, by the way, in the book Genesis Revisited, that planet is about here now, on its way back to us. Now he postulated this kind of orbit, like all the planets, And he said that whenever he reached some point where he was at a loss of how to proceed, he would turn to the bookshelf behind his desk, which was filmed during the interview, and look at my evidence, my ancient evidence in the 12th planet. And indeed, the 12th planet, my book was right there behind him. And he agreed with me, and that if, as I have suggested, this is the orbit of Nibiru or Marduk, then it would indeed be here now, which is what he postulates, and that this is really the distance between it on its way back to our vicinity and the sun at this particular time. And this interview, by the way, is part of a video, a documentary based on Genesis Revisited, and I'm happy to see that the bookstand in the back has some copies, newly, freshly made copies of that video, which is called Are We Alone? So this is a very significant sketch, and not just regarding the orbit. Now, one problem that he had, and certainly others dealing with the search for Planet X, was that to accept the notion that a planet orbiting our sun or any sun would have this elliptical orbit, which is usually associated with comets and not with planets. And if you haven't seen it yet in the papers today, you will probably see it tomorrow, but I had it already a few days ago. This is the most recent discovery in the heavens of a planet orbiting a distant star, many light years away. This is not our solar system. And lo and behold, which amazes the astronomers, it has an elliptical orbit. If this is its sun, then this would be its orbit. And what surprised me, perhaps shouldn't have surprised me, is that it really orbits, reaches the comparable, if you impose this on our solar system, where the asteroid belt where Tiamat used to be. So this corroborates not only the possibility of an elliptical orbit, but also perhaps the existence of Tiamat, which broke up and became the asteroid belt. So today's news corroborates this old information. Now, if the Anunnaki indeed traveled in space from their planet, counting Pluto the first, etc., the seventh, this might explain these treks on the moon of Neptune, for which there's no other explanation. It might explain these features on a moon of Uranus called Miranda. And this is an enlargement of the feature, definitely artificial or man-made. And all the other mysteries in our solar system. Now, the question that I had to ask myself writing those books was if indeed I believe that astronauts from another planet came to Earth in the ancient past, where did they land? The texts say that the first landing was a splashdown in the waters of the Persian Gulf, and that the group led by Ea or Enki later waded ashore and established the first settlement. They called it Eridu, which literally meant home in the faraway, or paraphrased, home away from home. In time, they increased the number of their settlements in what is now Iraq, but then later became Sumer, between the two rivers. And as I traced the layout of these cities, it became evident that they represent both a landing corridor based on the peaks of Ararat, the most prominent peaks in the ancient Near East, and with a city called Nippur as Mission Control Center. This was the layout of the spaceport, the first spaceport of the Anunnaki when they came to Earth. But that was, of course, destroyed completely by the deluge. I have suggested in my books that the deluge occurred about 13,000 years ago, and that its cause was the slippage of the ice sheet over the Antarctic that was becoming unstable anyway by the passage of Nibiru, and its gravitational pull finally gave the last shove, and this vast sheet of ice, billions of tons of ice, fell or slid into the ocean, the Indian Ocean, created a huge tidal wave that swept over the Earth, and only after some 40 days started to recede. If I'm right, of course I'm right, but if I'm right, then Antarctica at one time had to be without an ice cover. Now it is again covered by ice. And quite interestingly, some maps, they're called Mapas Mundi, maps of the world, from about the time of Columbus. This one is from, I think, 1513, just a few decades after Columbus discovered not America, but the outlying islands. And it shows already on this part, South America, which was not even reached by the Spaniards until 1531 by Pizarro, when he landed in Peru. It shows this, and it shows the tip of South America reaching towards the continent that we know today as Antarctica. Now, Antarctica as such, with ice or without ice, with ice, was discovered only in 1820. But here you have a map from 300 years earlier, showing not only South America, but also Antarctica without an ice cover. And this is how we know the continent looks under the sheet of ice with the aid of radar and other modern instruments. And this is the depiction here by a cartographer from 1513. And how could he know not only about South America, how could he know the existence of Antarctica, but how could he know how it looked or looks without an ice cover is unknown. What is known, though, is that there is another map. It is called the Piri Reis map, after the name of an admiral, a Turkish admiral, who ordered this map prepared. And this is from 1531. This is from the year when Pizarro just set foot on South America. And it shows all of South America correctly. This is my sketch here on the side, with its principal rivers, with the Andes Mountains. And this is before any European really traversed the continent. And it shows again the tip touching Antarctica. Now, fortunately here, now this map is in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. I had a chance to, my wife and I were a few years ago guests of the Turkish government, and we were given access, I was given access to the map and all the documents that go with it. Now, fortunately, the admiral wrote here on the margins, this, by the way, is half a map, and the other half is missing. It probably showed Africa and Europe, etc. And he wrote here the history. He recorded how this map was prepared. And he says unmistakably that this map is based on information and sources that came from ancient Mesopotamia. And anything that came from ancient Mesopotamia means Sumerian. So again, this information about the existence of Antarctica and of its being at one time after the deluge without an ice sheet is corroborated by documents that exist today. Now, this deluge wiped everything off the face of the earth, and the question is then, where was the spaceport after the deluge? And I've suggested that it was in the Sinai Peninsula, that again this was its layout, emulating the ancient one in Sumer, that it was located on the 30th parallel, which is precisely where the Sphinx, the gaze of the Sphinx, looks east along the 30th parallel. I've suggested that in order to anchor this line of the landing corridor, the Anunnaki, not any pharaoh, built two artificial mountains that we now call the two great pyramids of Giza. I've suggested that an ancient platform used for the landing and launching of records in the mountains of Lebanon was part of this layout. And I've suggested that Jerusalem was the new mission control center. Now, this is not just idle speculation on my part, because a Sumerian king called Gilgamesh, who is now definitely established as a historical figure, who reigned in a city called Uruk at circa 2900 BC, which means almost 5,000 years ago, recorded for posterity the following tale. He says that his father was the high priest of the city, of the temple in Uruk, but his mother was one of the female Anunnaki. And as he grew older and saw family members, friends die, he started to think about all these issues of life and death. And he came to his mother and said to her, if you are my mother and you are one of the Anunnaki with their so-called immortality, which is really relatively immense longevity, why should I have the lifespan? Why should I die as a mortal? Because if you are my mother, then I'm 2/3 divine. This is another issue. Why 2/3 and not 1/2 if the mother was one of the Anunnaki? And she said to him, you're right, you're right. But the only way you could attain our longevity is if you would go to our planet and enjoy the cycles of that planet, which are 3,600 times those on Earth. So in order to reach that planet, he journeyed first of all to what the Sumerian text called, without any question, the landing place in the Cedar Mountain, which is in Lebanon. It's the only place where cedars grow in the mountains in the ancient Near East. And he reached the Cedar Mountain. Again, each time, in order to know whether to continue, whether the journey is auspicious or not, he would dream dreams, but not dreams that come to him, but what is called oracular dreams. The text describes how he would sit in a particular position within some kind of a circle, and then the oracle, the divine message, would come to him once he fell asleep. And each time he was told, yes, yes, you can proceed. But when he reached that gateway to the Cedar Mountain, he discovered that it is guarded by a robotic guardian. And this is the depiction of the robotic guardian. He battled this robotic guardian The texts say that while the battle or the fight went on, the goddess Ishtar, who had an eye on him, once a year, she performed a rite called the rite of the sacred marriage. She would invite a chosen human male to spend the night with her, and as Gilgamesh knew and told her, yes, you do that, but none of them lives beyond the night. They're all found dead in the morning. So don't do me favors, don't choose me. But she had an eye on him, and being both a goddess of war and goddess of love, she, as often as not, was depicted naked. And the text says that she was watching the fight in her sky chamber. Anyway, though Gilgamesh won the fight, other developments were not auspicious, and he fled back to Uruk. So his mother told him, okay, you can undertake now to another place, a place where the rocket ships descend and ascend. Now the night, by the way, before the fight at the Cedar Mountain, Gilgamesh describes how he saw a rocket ship rise from that landing place. And very vividly, as if we are watching a launching at Cape Canaveral. And what stood on that platform, which still exists, by the way, it is a platform made of gigantic stones, about 5 million square feet of it, is depicted on a Phoenician coin. And you can see, besides Phoenician and other temples that were eventually built there, you can see this enclosure of the vast platform and what stood upon it. So the description of Gilgamesh has also some pictorial evidence. And what remains today of the platform, this is one of the retaining walls, is the colossal stones of which it was built. This is a person, just for size. Some of these stones, or stone blocks, which are very perfect in shape and lie side by side over these millennia through earthquakes and other calamities without any mortar. They weigh anywhere from 400 to 500 tons, and there are 3 there that are called the trilitons that weigh 1,100 tons each. Now, there's no piece of equipment today that can lift 1,100 tons, but in antiquity, and according to the lore connected with the place before the deluge, someone, my guess is the Anunnaki, quarried these colossal stones. We know where, because one of them, unfinished, is found in the quarry place about 5 miles away across a valley. So somebody quarried them, lifted them, carried them for 5 miles and placed them precisely in place. So this was the landing place in the mountains of Baalbek. When that attempt failed, Gilgamesh went to the Sinai Peninsula, where, as I've suggested, the new spaceport was located. Now, he again describes what he saw there, but again we have pictorial evidence to support the tale of Gilgamesh and my conclusions, or my the way I understood the text. This is a depiction from the tomb of an Egyptian governor of the Sinai. His name was Hui. And along the walls of his tomb, various scenes from his life were depicted. He was here, he did this, etc., etc. When the section reaches his tenure as governor of the Sinai Peninsula for, I'm talking about Egyptians in pharaonic times, this is the depiction that appears. This, as you can see, is ground level, because you see trees and people and giraffes. And this is underground, and you see a silo, and you see a multi-stage rocket ship, and the command module here above ground. Now, not by chance, I suggest, is the way the Sumerians depicted these rocket ships. They depicted them exactly this way, and they said that this command module, which they called the gear, could then separate. So these ships did not have to land each time, but just the command module could land. So this is a depiction of what was at the spaceport in the Sinai Peninsula. Now the platform at Baalbek still exists. It is not a place which one should rush to visit. I'm very anxious to be there again. I was there when I was a teenager, not realizing yet all the implications, because it's now the headquarters of the Hezbollah and other Islamic fanatics who are just looking for Americans or Europeans to be taken hostage. But the spaceport, regrettably, does not exist anymore, because at the time of Abraham, he was a witness to it. This is the story in the Bible of the upheavaling of Sodom and Gomorrah. Nuclear weapons were used in a struggle, in a war between various clans of the Anunnaki for supremacy on Earth, and one side used nuclear weapons in order to deprive the other side of the use of the spaceport. And you can see here the immense cavity. This is a NASA photograph from space, and the immense cavity that is where the spaceport used to be in the Central Valley, and all the cracks in the peninsula's surface still there. I went to the Sinai on my own, and also with one of my groups, and you can still see among the perfectly white limestone mountains that encircle the Central Valley, you can see a huge area strewn with broken up pieces of stones, almost gravel size, totally blackened out. The only explanation that geologists have for it, and I've spoken to some, is that this must be the result of a volcanic eruption. When I tell them that there are no volcanoes in the Sinai Peninsula, they shrug. And I think that I see here the explanation. Now, if you look on a map of the ancient Near East and mark out all these places associated with the space activities of the Anunnaki. This is Baalbek in the mountains of Lebanon. This is the spaceport in the Sinai Peninsula. These are the Giza pyramids, you recall the outline of the corridor. And this, I suggest, is where the new Mission Control Center was, a place nowadays called Jerusalem. And this, I suggest, as you read the daily news, and that's why I said that I once thought that I'm dealing only with the past, and then I thought that I'm really explaining the future, and now I realize that I'm really explaining the daily headlines, because you have read, I'm sure, or seen on television, all the news about the bloodshed that followed the so-called opening of the archaeological tunnel alongside the western wall of the Temple Mount. This is a familiar photograph from the air of Jerusalem, and this is the area known as the Temple Mount. Again, a very large platform, not as vast as Baalbek. It's only about 1.5 million square feet, and it has upon it nowadays, since the 7th century AD, when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, two main buildings. One is a mosque, the Mosque of Omar, which is here, and one is called the Dome of the Rock. It's a structure surmounted by a golden dome, which protects a very unusual, unique rock outcropping. The Caliph, by the way, who built this brought the dome from Baalbek because it was surmounting a Byzantine church. So maybe he too saw some connection between the two places, which I say were connected. One is the original landing place and one is mission control center. Now, this area is surrounded or held together as a platform by retaining walls, and this is the western wall, sometimes known in previous years as the Wailing Wall. This portion here, okay, I'll come back to it. This is the rock under the dome of the rock. It's a circular dome structure, and this is the rock outcropping. And you see that on three sides it has been squared or lined up in certain angles, and there are all kinds of cavities cut into the rock. This is precisely where the Ark of the Covenant was placed at the time of the first temple built by Solomon. And this, according to beliefs, is the sacred rock to which Abraham was instructed to go with his son Isaac and be ready to sacrifice him to God, but of course was at the last minute told not to do it. The Ark of the Covenant is believed by archaeologists to have been precisely here. Now this rock is interesting, not only in its shape and all the histories that are connected with it, but also because it is really like a canopy. There's a way, there's stairs leading below this rock, and when you go down, you really look at its bottom part, and you find yourself in a open area with many niches, which when I visited it once looked to me as if some equipment was placed here, was placed here, was placed there, all, in my opinion, enhancing the suggestion that this was the mission control center. If you get to visit the place, and you are allowed only to stand around now, there is a perfectly cut hole here, and if you strain and bend a little, you can look through it to what is below, which is most intriguing. And now, this is the portion of the western wall, western retaining wall. As I said, the mosque is here, the dome of the rock is here, and this is the western wall. And this is how it is today. In earlier times, before Israel regained control of the old city, only this small portion of the wall was seen. Yeah, only this portion was basically seen. This is from the time of the British Mandate. And here you can see the entrance to the so-called archaeological tunnel. Now this is really not a tunnel, because this was a passageway all along the wall, all the way to its end here. But in time, buildings were encroaching on the wall. Some built their houses here, and others on top of them, and others on top of them, until in the end this became like a tunnel. And what the Israelis did was, instead of being able just to walk in some distance, they cleared the debris and opened an existing exit at that end, so that instead of some people going in and having to turn back before the next group could go in, people now can walk through, and instead of some 70,000 people a year, about 400,000, they estimate, could now visit the place. And now, what's inside this tunnel? When one could only walk part of it because the rest of the debris was still there, This is what one could see, an extension of what was seen for centuries. But now that it was cleared, this is what one can see inside. What was discovered was that the lower courses, the lower portions of this retaining wall, which is in many ways similar, though not in exactly the same size, to the platform in Baalbek, also is built of colossal stones. These stone blocks, perfectly shaped, are about 11 feet high. Sonar and other equipment determined that they are about 14 feet deep, and some of them extend for 40 to 50 feet, weighing close to 600 tons. So this indicates to me the connection between Jerusalem and Baalbek, indicates to me that I'm right in my conclusion that Jerusalem served in early times, before there were Jews and before there were Muslims, as a mission control center. And this, I suggest to you, is why Jerusalem has been hallowed since time immemorial. And if you know that, you understand perhaps what all the fighting, all the struggle is about, because deep inside, even perhaps without realizing it, people know that this is a living, a remaining monument from the time when we or our ancestors could witness the space connection. Now, all that I've told you implies that astronauts from Nibiru came to Earth and landed here and had spaceports. And who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Fortunately, I found the answer that I'm not wrong in the British Museum. And I suggest that when you go to London and visit the British Museum, don't go to the Sumerian section, because this circular tablet is displayed in a section dealing with the development of writing. But in fact, and this greatly damaged circular tablet depicts this on it, and all these writings deal with space travel. Before I switch to the next slide, I want to point out that any book on ancient or early mathematics and algebra and geometry would tell you that the ancients were not familiar with the shape of an ellipse. Yet all they have to do is go to the British Museum and see for themselves what remained of an elliptical shape. For simplicity's sake and brevity, I focus on this segment, 1 of 8, and translated into English, this is what it says. Along the 2 margins there are instructions: rocket, rocket, pile up, mountain, mountain, high, 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 etc., vapor, etc. And these are names, partly damaged, of planets. And this is the route from Nibiru to our part of the solar system. As you can see, the Nibiru depicted here by the symbol of a mountainous planet. The route shows that there was a correction, a route correction, a turn, passing between 2 planets. Kakab Dilgan means the planet Jupiter, and Kakab Apin means the planet Mars. And it says here, under these dots, the deity Enlil, who was the commander who followed Enki, went by the planets. Now if you count by how many planets he went, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this was the route from Nibiru to the seventh planet. Now, this route correction between Mars and Jupiter corroborates pictorially what the Sumerian texts wrote, that Mars had served as a way station for the Anunnaki between their planet and ours. And this brings me to a very recent great hoopla by NASA about the discovery of rocks or small pieces of rocks from Mars in Antarctica, and that NASA found that they have perhaps evidence of early primitive bacterial life going back to 4 billion years. Now that announcement by NASA puzzled me greatly, because if you have read my book, Genesis Revisited, which was published 6 years ago, you would have read all about those rocks from Mars and their discovery in 1984. Indeed, if you would watch the video, Are We Alone, you would see that it has a whole segment about how they were discovered, incidentally by the Japanese and not by United States scientists. And this is even the famous ALH 84001, and it's all from my book Genesis Revisited. So the importance, in my opinion, of this announcement by NASA is not that maybe there is this early bacterial life. The importance lies in the fact that NASA made the announcement at this time, because when the head of NASA, Mr. Goldin, was asked, so what is this, what is the significance, what's the importance of maybe there have been some microbes on Mars 4 billion years ago, he said, well, of course, it leads us to the ultimate question, are we alone? Which is the title of my video, which he has on his desk. I don't know if he watched it, but he has it on his desk. And the possibility that there was life on Mars is not new either, so that just the fact that he now chose to announce it. Because all the evidence from the 1970s by spacecraft of NASA itself indicate that there was once plenty of water on Mars, as these pictures show. These are not my pictures, these are NASA pictures of flowing rivers, etc. And of course there is the famous face on Mars, that if it is a face carved from a huge rock, then it is artificial. Somebody was there, somebody looking like this was there. NASA to this day says that this is just a natural phenomena, you know, wind and sand and whatever. Even here on Earth you sometimes see a mountain and it looks perhaps as a face of a lion, the head of a lion. So this, and when they were asked about this latest mission launched today, whether it would go back to this area called Cydonia, they said there's no reason to do that. But NASA itself has dubbed this photograph the Inca walls, because they are so similar to some of the structures above Cusco in Peru. I'm more impressed by this structure, which is not only two straight walls, but two straight walls at a right angle to each other. I'm more impressed by this structure, which some call the Pentagon, or this one, a whole array of structures, maybe even a road, or by this one that looks to me like a hub of a spaceport. So in my mind, there's absolutely no doubt that, as the Sumerians said, Mars was a way station, and if there are structures there still to be seen, or the remains of them, it is not because some Earthlings went to Mars, but because the same Anunnaki who visited Earth also visited Mars. Now, this really brings us to a most amazing and hardly known incident that took place in 1989. In 1989, or at the end of 88, the Soviets launched 2 probes to Mars. Apart from orbiting Mars and sending back photographs, the main mission was to examine very closely one of the 2 moonlets of Mars. Mars has 2 moonlets, very small, tiny moons. One looks like a rock, an asteroid that was gravitationally pulled to Mars. Another one, this one, is presumed even by some Soviet scientists to be an artificial object because it has this perfect hollow entry, circular entry to it, and it is presumed to be hollow because its weight as measured by its orbit is too small for its size, so it could be hollow. So the Russians launched, and this moonlet is called Phobos. So the Russians launched 2 probes to Mars at the end of 88 to arrive in 89, and they named them Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. Phobos 1, they claim, never reached Mars, and because they said one of their technicians leaned on his console and by mistake leaned on some button and the spacecraft went astray. The other one, they say, did reach Mars and started to send back, by the way, this is how the spacecraft looks, and started to send back photographs. One of them, I managed a few years ago to obtain 38 of those photographs in various ways, and this is just to show you one of them, which shows definitely a 3-walled structure at the walls at right angles to each other. And much more interesting, perhaps, was this photograph on the 1st of March 1989. The V means that it was taken with the visual camera, like cameras that we use, for normal light. And it showed this feature, like a grid of a city. Surprisingly, to the Soviets at the time, was the fact that the second camera with infrared, which takes pictures not from light but from the emission of heat or lack of it, also showed this grid. And when the 2 were combined, this was the result. As if one is looking at the remains of a city. And no one has ever offered an explanation for this. After 26 days of orbit around Mars, this image appeared, and the Soviets claimed, and there's a long interview with the leaders of the parallel to NASA, the Soviet one, in this video, Are We Alone? And they said this is definitely a shadow of something that was flying or hovering between the spacecraft and the surface of Mars. And they give reasons why they think it's just a shadow of something of very sharp elliptical shape. And this appeared also in the infrared photographs. And in the interview on camera for this documentary of mine, Are We Alone?, the head of the parallel of NASA, the Soviet one, says, well, some may say that the object was a flying saucer. We don't say so. But some do, he said on camera. And now, so what this was, again, remained without an explanation. Later on, when the Soviet spacecraft disappeared, some have tried to say that, well, the shadow was the shadow of the moonlet Phobos itself. But, and I found a photograph of the shadow of the moonlet Phobos, and you definitely see that it's not one and the same. Now, after 26 days, the Soviet spacecraft was ordered by remote control to start its real mission. The real mission was to fly in tandem 50 meters above the moonlet, perhaps the artificial moonlet, and bombard it with laser beams. And as the Soviet spacecraft reached this position, something put it out of commission. It went into a spin and disappeared. The spacecraft managed to send one more picture before it went into a spin. And this is the picture. And this is the moonlet Phobos. The spacecraft is somewhere here, and this is coming at it either from the surface of Mars or from the moonlet itself. Now, as you know, about 2 or 2.5 years ago, our spacecraft to Mars, called Mars Observer, also, when it was about to start exploring Mars with laser beams and other disturbing equipment, it also disappeared mysteriously. And this, to me, brought to mind the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel, when mankind was building what today would be called the launch tower, and somebody said, we're not going to let them do it. And it seems to me that someone on Mars says, you want to take pictures, but you're not going to bombard me with laser beams. Now, if the past is the future and the present, I chose to conclude my talk with this depiction on a cylinder seal. Again, it is about 4,500 years old. And it shows an astronaut, one of those who splashed down, on the 6th planet. And he's greeting or relaying a message to an eagleman, another astronaut, on the 7th planet, Earth. And between them, there is a spacecraft. Now, unlike many of the other depictions on cylinder seals, this one is dated. It has a date on it. The age of Pisces. Now, if you recall the depiction of the zodiac and the cycle, we are now nearing the end of the age of Pisces. Now, the cycle is about 26,000 years. Now, this could be an event from 26,000 years ago or 52,000 years ago. This I don't know. But it indicates that in the age of Pisces, and if you recall, the phenomenon of precession is a retardation. The cycle does not go forward, the cycle goes back. Maybe this tells us what to expect before the age of Pisces ends. Thank you very much.